last presentation of the day, and actually,
Thanks, mate.
It's a really great pleasure for me to have Ben do this presentation on multiple levels. Not just the fact we're such great mates. Ben's was our longest, as To Be Limitless, our longest standing corporate client. In fact, our very first corporate relationship was with Blue House Group. It's something that we were really where we broke out of just doing what we did, coaching on a personal level, and one-to-one level, and started to think about working with organisations, and something we're really proud of that relationship started with Blue House Group, and the relationship out of that, and where Ben has been an investor in To Be Limitless in the past, something that and the partnership with Peter, that shape has changed, and so our friendship is broad and deep, our relationship is broad and deep. So it's great that he's here today, and his focus is on something that we all think a lot about: community. We never care about network, ever. We always think community, and community thinks win-win. Whereas networking is a transactional piece. We're always looking to create community around what we do. And Ben has been a fundamental foundation part of that community. It's on the very first trip to Thailand, and has been a great supporter of us for such a long time. So just thought it'd be great to get Ben in and talk about the power of community. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Mick. I'll tell you what was really helpful was having Peter walk past me on the way to the bathroom and say they were the two best presentations I've ever seen. But honestly, but genuinely awesome, really good, really insightful. Thanks, Pete. But yeah, when Mick asked me about 3 weeks ago, and we have a lot of very quick conversations where we're not really thinking about what we're talking about, we're usually laughing, talking about something, and he dropped it into the conversation that you're doing a talk in 3 weeks' time at the Pangolin on a Thursday afternoon, and I said, yeah, no problem. He knows how much I'm passionate about community, how much I've got from it in the last 10 or 11 years, how I like to put myself in uncomfortable situations and just say yes and see how it goes, and a little bit of that winging it that Craig talked about. So I said yes, no problem, but over the next few days I started to get really worried, because I was thinking about, do I really understand the power of community? So I started to research community, Google, the go-to for research. And I look around this room, and I do a lot of presentations in my business, in my industry, a bit like Craig. We present all the time. It's a big part of what we do, but this is a different audience, and quite nervous, if I'm honest, coming to this crowd, because we look around this room and there's a powerhouse of people in this room that I admire and respect. So a lot of successful people in this room. I started my journey on community about 10 years ago, and what I define, and I have defined over the last 10 years as success, is exactly that, security and choice. Prior to my understanding community, which I'll come on to in a moment, I didn't really understand success, or rather I had a very different view on what success was. I'm not ashamed to admit it was somewhat materialistic. You know, it was wealth, it was materialistic, it was all of those things that I think we maybe have and we need to shake off. But over the years, and with the help of Mick and the various communities that I've become part of, I've sort of defined my version of success as security and choice. And the reality is, with many people I've met, roundtables, I actually think it's what we're all looking for, right? I mean, I have lots of subheadings. There's subheadings under security. I mean, finance plays a part in security, right? Various other things. And choice, you could argue that if you're secure, that offers you choice. I define choice as being able to send my kids to the school that I choose that they go to, right? Being able to go on to a holiday where I choose to go to take the family. Being able to invest, do certain things. So, it's my definition of success. Very different to what it was 15 years ago. Fear plays a huge part in, I think, all of our lives to various extents. If you take 0 to 100, some people might be 1, fearless, but no one's fear-free, I don't think. And some might be 90-95%. I know it plays a big part in my life. And it's something that, you can either, and I think it used to hold me back. I now use it as a fuel and as an energy to drive me forward. And it's something we've talked about a lot. But I think it is probably the number one factor that holds us all back from wherever we need to be. By having measurable goals, it's certainly something that's played a factor in my life. I've always loved this question. Right? Incredibly powerful, and I think it just stops you in your tracks, because if fear plays a part in all of our lives, it's a bit like placing a bet that you know you can't lose, right? You'd chuck a load more money on it, wouldn't you? Of course you would. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail, right? It's hypothetical, but I think it really does open up questions, and it's sort of expanded my thought process in terms of my goals, reshaped how I tackle my goals every year on our trip to Thailand. So I think as we get older, and there's a fair few of us in the room who are apparently 54 is the new middle age, right? So we're not quite there yet, but some of us are very close or just past there. But purpose becomes much more important. Tim talked about it a lot in his talk. We start to reshape what success looks like, what's important to us, less materialistic, and I'm not necessarily talking about COVID, but I know I've certainly reshaped a number of things over the last 10 years, but in particular over the last two or 3 years. And this sort of throws out a fairly important question, I think, which we'll come back to as we go through this talk. But can we achieve purpose without community? I don't think so. It's something I've changed my mindset on this over the last 10 years, possibly with age, possibly with where I am in my life. My kids getting older, getting towards secondary school. And a second question, and I think this is really dependent on your version of what success is, right? I mean, I think we all have very, very different versions of success. And Mick and I debated this over the last couple of days. If your version of success is purely wealth, then maybe you don't need community. Possibly, right? But I believe when I look around this room, most people in this room are values driven. I think there's a sense of, a force for good. So it's not just wealth, although wealth drives security. So is it critical to success? So I want to talk a little bit about myself and what I'll call as sort of my decade of community, or what I refer to. I said to Mick, I call this as LBMT, life before Mick Todd. It was very different. But we met in 2010, the GFC. I think it arrived in the UAE a bit later than the US and the UAE, but we were all reading the papers and we all saw what was on the horizon. We all saw what was coming. My business, Blue House, was about 8 years old at the time. We could see there was a difficult time ahead. Difficult year, 2 years, who knew? Relatively young business, you could argue, 8 years. I knew I had a great business, I had a great client list. We were successful. We were probably about 17, 18 people at the time. I could see, I'm in the fit out, construction, design industry, engineering. And I could see what was happening in the rest of our industry was very reactive, and it wasn't proactive. And Mick and anybody who knows me is I take a very proactive view to most things. So what did that mean? That meant letting people go, downsizing, panicking, battling down the hatches, and just hope for the best. And I thought, we don't want to do that. We've got a great team, we've got a great client list. I believe in this business. There's got to be another way, right? So I would have been, I suppose, 36 at the time. So someone in a conversation had said, well, what about executive coaching? And I said, well, okay, fine. So we put a tender out to 3 companies. And I remember the meeting that Mick and I had in our boardroom it would have been December, January 2009, 2010. Again, the clouds were brewing. The crisis was on its way. We'd squeezed a bit of profit that year. We'd done okay. Mick walked in, we had a meeting, we hit it off straight away, and he used a word that I loved, and I thought, this is the guy for us. This is 2010. This is the guy for us. So he used the word ritual. So rather than being a process-driven business, I'm a big believer in process, very OCD, as Mick knows. Everything has to be just right. The concept of rather than driving a process-driven business, let's drive a rituals-based business, much more human, much more about people doing what they need to do and understanding why they're doing it and how that relates to the rest of the business. So Mick came in. We took Mick on as an executive coach. I was sort of expecting, actually I didn't know what to expect, really. I'd never had an executive coach. I was new to this. I was relatively new to running a business. And Mick came in and did initially what was in his contract or scope, if you like. Let's have a look at the business. Let's look who's making us money. Let's look at the revenue. All the things that Mick said he would do. But what I noticed around this time, and this is the start of my life as in sort of community as I now see it today, was Mick started to introduce me. There's that part of your business. I think you should talk to this guy. I think he can help you. There's that part of your business. If we're going to ride this crisis, you need to be fit. You need to talk to this guy. Get yourself strong, right? Your branding might need looking at. Talk to this guy. And I found myself in this position where prior to that, plenty of friends, plenty of people I knew, spent time with, old friends, new friends, etc. We'd go out drinking, do what we do. But we, spent most of the time talking bullshit, nothing of real value, All of a sudden, there was this community of people around me, most of which I didn't even really know, who just wanted to go out of their way to help me with my brand, to help me with my finances. So Mick was pulling all of these people in. And the result of that was that we had a horrendous 2010. We lost lots of money. But the strategy was I said to Mick, I said, look, all we want to do is keep our team. We don't want to let anybody go. Make sure everyone gets paid on time, look after our clients. That's all we need, right? We'll lose money, doesn't matter. And we achieved all of those things together. It was tough, but everybody battled through. And as a result of that, 2011, everything we lost in 2010, we made back in 2011, in 1 year, in 12 months. Now, bear in mind, the GFC was a 3-year, 4-year window. So we went into 2011, 2012, and the market started to recover, et cetera. But it was a real eye-opener to me that there was these people out there and this sort of structure of people, and many of them are in this room and I found myself going out of my way to help them. It was very reciprocal. So that was sort of a real eye-opener to me. And that was when boot camp started, and it's been mentioned a couple of times today, probably for the wrong reasons, Tim. You nearly died, but. One of Billy's famous phrases is, we're due a fatality, to be fair. And he's probably right. Every time we get on the plane to Thailand, he says, well, this could be the year. So, but boot camp started in 2010, 2011, primarily around the idea that control what we can control. We can't necessarily control the economy and the market and all those things, but we can be fit. Right? So let's just get our asses out of bed at 5 a.m. twice a week and let's get strong, right? We can control that, right? We'd be in bed anyway. And it's still going today. 11 years on, boot camp's still going. So it was very much about a group of guys just saying, let's get our heads together and let's just navigate this. So boot camp is, and I'm going to talk about it a bit more in a bit more detail in a moment. Thailand was has become huge, and there's many people in this room who have been, but I remember in 2013, Mick had this idea of going on a leadership retreat to Phuket. And I said to Mick, I said, there's no way I'm going to sell that to my wife. Right? So I went home, and these are her exact words. I said, I think I almost mumbled the last bit. I said, oh, Mick's got this idea. We're going on this leadership retreat to Phuket. And her exact words were, those two things don't belong in the same sentence. But then I said, I'm going, you know, she knows Mick, and you know, she was like, well, as soon as you go with Mick, it's fine. So the first trip to Thailand happened, and there's been one every year, bar last year and this year. You know, and we'll talk about that trip, those trips in a moment. But I've had conversations on those trips that I know, and I say this to my wife every time I come back, honestly, it's worth the money. I know I could have gone my entire life and never had. You know, probably several conversations. You know, I've had conversations at boot camp that I could have gone my entire, and I know these, you know, a lot of the guys I know don't have this community, they don't have this openness, they don't have these conversations. So the point being is I really experienced the concept of leaning into community rather than being typical blokes and leaning out and keeping ourselves to ourselves. So to sort of step away from myself for a moment, I wanted to look at what is community, because I struggled a little bit after the few days that I'd agreed with Mick that I would do this talk. I didn't want to just do a Google research and say, like, this is what it is. I wanted to sort of try and go a bit deeper, both with the meaning of community, but also with the various communities I'm part of. And if you look at some of these statements here, which I'll let you read in yourselves, but most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. Successful individual knows that his or her achievement depends on it. There's lots on community. There's lots of books. We've all read a lot of these books. They talk about empathy, understanding, intimacy, mutual valuing, but generally positive. And there's this sort of mindset that community is positive. And it's not, actually. I mean, the Nazis technically were a community, right? But we wouldn't argue, they're not positive, it's not a positive thing. Ku Klux Klan, some of the more extremist groups around the world, not positive. So community isn't automatically a positive thing, right? But I think it's fair to say we're here today to talk about positive community, and the various communities that I'm part of. And I mean, this is clearly a powerful community today. I don't know everybody in this room, but I think there's an automatic sort of welcoming of guys. If somebody else has invited them, they must be a good guys. Goes with the no dickheads rule there, Nick. So I don't know how many of you read this book. It's fantastic. Written in 1937. A person wearing glasses and a suit. So he wrote in 1937 about the mastermind principle. Now, community's been around forever, whether it be a town or a village or how far do you want to go back. But the concept of how powerful community is, particularly amongst men. Sorry, Olivia. Which is within that, he talks about the mastermind principle. Two or more people actively engaged in the pursuit of a definite purpose with a positive mental attitude constitute an unbeatable force. So proactive, the idea of moving forward, we're in this together, we'll support one another, I think is a brilliant statement. Again, a group, it's from the same book, a group of like-minded people meeting together to help each other to grow personally and professionally. I think that's very true of the communities I'm part of, and many of us are part of. Where, there's a genuine sense of, I want what's good for you because you want what's good for me. And I love, the first word, deliberately. So deliberately seeking the company of people. We don't have to be here today. We're all invited, but clearly we want to move forward, be better, support one another. And about building a life that we desire. So what I did was I thought, okay, and I'm still struggling with this idea. So I put a couple of messages out to the group, probably 3 communities that I'm part of, TBYB, Bootcamp, one other. and said, right, guys, I need your help, right? Give me an image that defines community for you, not knowing what to expect. And this was the first image I got back, okay, from the Welshman at the back there. And I wasn't, I wasn't sure. It wasn't sheep, at least, right? What's that? But there was a sort of narrative that came with it. But look, you know, you could argue community is a sense of belonging. It's a sense of being together. It's a sense of a level of identity. So why not? Someone else sent this and said, this is Dermot Hegarty. I don't know if that's true. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. So I'm starting to get all these images. I'm starting to build a picture of the community that I'm part of and starting to question that. Someone sent this as a group of Liverpool fans. I think that could be chairman at the back there. And round about the same time, a group of guys that we love were out. They weren't lattes. But you know what I love about this picture is yes, they're on the piss, but there's genuine love there and support between these guys, because I know I wasn't there, but the sort of conversations that were going on would have been around a couple of challenges a couple of those guys had at the time. And then it got a bit more deep. I received this from Dan Gill, who's here. There's Billy. You'll know a few of those faces in there. And he sent this to me personally. He didn't put this on the group. I've got his permission to share it. He's not here today. And I'll let you read that. So I've sort of bolded out what I think is most relevant. Now, if any of you know Dan Gill, you know, you can't see it. Do you want to come close? All right, I'll read the important bits then. Okay, if I was to pull out the race, so they basically did an Ironman. I think it was in France. If I was to pull out the race itself and the months of training, there is zero chance of me doing it on my own. I did it because of the presence of those around me. And the last line, for me, community isn't just about the cumulative spirit support of people in numbers, it's about the way in which others help you achieve your own goals without them even realizing it. I love that last bit there, without them even realizing it. You know, that's true community, right? It shouldn't feel like I'm doing this because I'm expecting something in return, right? And I think that's when you know, if it ever becomes like that, then you have a problem. But after the penguins and the scousers and everything else as well, it started to sort of get a bit deeper. This is one of the trips to Thailand, where we were trekking through the jungle for 3 nights, I think it was, really challenging. David told us we had to keep a fire going 24 hours a day in a wet jungle. Turns out we didn't. It was just something he wanted us to do. But the reason I wanted to show this image is and there's not a lot of diversity about these images, I'll be granted, but is there was a guy in this image, and I won't mention his name, who is sort of self-ejected himself from this community. So you had a group of guys who were sort of were trying to stay alive in the jungle, because apparently there was elephants and pumas. But clearly a shared set of values, a shared set of support for one another, looking out for each other. And again, I won't name names, but there was a huge misalignment, and Mick and I have talked about this before, this presentation. There was a huge misalignment on values, and you know, Mick used the analogy that the human body rejects anything that is alien, or want of a better word. And a strong community will do that. We have, for example, at boot camps, we have the no dickheads rule. It's quite simple, but it kind of works. So if you have a strong community with strong values and a strong sense of why we're doing this and what we're here for, it sort of self-manages in a way. And then boot camp. I was there this morning with David. He's taken it to another level. I think, again, there's a lot of guys in this room. And boot camp, again, was started in 2010 because of the crisis, because of the GFC, because a group of guys were just looking to manage their way through the GFC and stay fit. David has taken it to another level. He took it over 18 months ago. But there is a very jokey side to it. It's much more than keeping fit. I know for sure, I know several stories around this. This has nearly killed people, but it's kept many men sane during many difficult times, including myself. No matter how difficult your week, no matter how difficult your day, you will come away from boot camp on a Tuesday or Thursday on fire, alive, energized. It's almost like someone's just hit the reset. Now that's what community is, right? It just takes you into a different place. And it has become an incredibly important ritual. So we also finish, this is something that David has introduced, and we finish on the ropes with meditation. And it's interesting because I think, again, this is a group of burly guys. And I think if anyone had mentioned meditation 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we probably all would have said, what are you talking about? We don't understand anything about that. So there's a sense within the boot camp community of wanting to understand what will help us get better, what will make us better, what will create the best version of ourselves as we move into the day. It really is special if anyone wants to come down and join us one day. And then I got this from, some of you might know Taft Morris. He couldn't find an image. So he said, again, it was a personal message to me. He said, look, I've really tried, but I can't find anything. I'm sorry, you can't see that at the back? No. So I'm struggling to put a sense of community into words, let alone a picture, since there are a few communities that I'm part of, and the beauty of this is some overlap, and I'm unable to create a collage without taking forever to get pictures together. But fundamentally, there are some base factors: shared emotional connection, inclusion, a sense of belonging, which I think is important, influence and integration, fulfillment of needs that ultimately brings happiness to one's life. So that's Taff. We know and love Taff. He's a very, very important part of, I think, 3 or 4 communities that we're part of. But again, it was a private message to me. You know, it really challenged a few people, I think, in terms of what community is, or the power of community. Another great image, I think this was taken out the back here, a few friendly faces in there. This was sent to me. Does look like a Right Said Fred convention. This was taken on one of the trips to Thailand, but I will tell a story around this because this was another one that was sent to me. So this is Billy, the thermometer, or the thermostat as we call him, who energizes a room. This picture was taken, this has nothing to do with community, it's just really funny. So David had woken us up and told us to swim to the island. We swam to the island and then run to the top of this hill. And we got to this rock is beautifully formed. It almost looks like Disney have created it, right? John Nolan, this is at the point where John Nolan has said to him, this is where they filmed The Lion King. And Billy turned around and went, really? Oh, all right. And he said, did they film both of them here? And this is him trying to explain his way out of it. A lot of laughter, but we then sat down on this rock and we meditated for a little while, and we had a round table, and Mick threw out a couple of loaded questions, as he does, and it was a moment in time that we'll never forget. It was magic, and it was a lot of laughter, but a very serious side to it as well. Yeah, good on Billy. And you know, the Thailand trips are magic. This is the boat that we tend to cruise around the east coast of Thailand on. But you know, very structured, lots of round tables. And as I said, there's conversations that I've had on that trip or that boat that I would go my whole life without having. And then ugly shirt night. That's actually how Mick dresses most of the time. It's good fun. A couple more pictures of that trip. Someone shared this. There's Serge actually there. He might be here later on, I guess. But someone shared this. I don't know who this lady is. There's Shane Manning, I think Martin Bryan, I think Taff was in there as well. But they'd shared this. I think it's the only lady we have in all of the pictures. She apparently, it was a fairly significant birthday, and they shared this image as a real sense of achievement, having conquered this mountain. I didn't want to come here without really speaking the truth about how important community has been for me. Because we laugh, we talk about community, but I don't want to scratch the surface. I have great days. I consider myself incredibly fortunate, very grateful, have a great life. I'm privileged. I think we all are. Some people will hear me using the term, we are the lucky ones. But I have really bad days. I've had bad days. And I think the reason I'm saying this is because we all do. And we don't talk about them all the time. And I think, particularly as men, I think the mistake we make at times is that we sort of deal with it on our own. Now, if I hadn't joined the communities or I hadn't become part of the communities, and I've seen many men sort of self-eject from some of these communities over the last 10 years and gone on and done something different. They've been given all the support they need, and it just hasn't worked out or what have you. But it really is important. I think Mick talks about it a lot. I think more so now than ever that we lean in. And I've got a really bad habit at times of things are really hard and they're really difficult. You sort of go into your shell when actually what we need to do is be leaning into the various communities that we're part of. We really need to, and I think what I've found over the last 10 or so years is with these communities, they certainly give back, they certainly support, and it becomes very much a partnership in terms of shared success. I literally have two kinds of day, and it's become that black and white. Now, again, something Mick and I talk about a lot, and I think we sort of identified this some years back. So what do I mean by that? So if you can imagine the content of the day is already predetermined, okay? Might be some meetings that are locked in, there might be a lunch, there might be various elements that are predetermined for you, okay? And there might be a bit of agility within that day. But if I get out of bed at 5 o'clock and I go to boot camp or I lean into the community or go for a bike ride with these guys, it's about, and I've changed my mindset from the ritual is not the 5 a.m. start, right? Sorry, let me reword that. The ritual is not the run, the ritual is not the bike ride, the ritual is not boot camp, the ritual is the 5 a.m. start. Okay, the content of that 5 a.m. start is what you choose it to be. And I used to look at it the other way around. I'll get up and have a run. I hate running, right? Why am I doing that? So getting out of bed at 5 o'clock. So the idea that the content of the day is the content of the day. Let's control what we can control. Let's control what happens at the beginning of the day, and that shapes the mindset that we carry into the day. And Tim talked a bit about that as well. And then there are the days, we're all human, then there are the days where you don't follow your rituals. And for me, it's become as black and white as that. The day when I actually fall into the routine, do what I need to do boot camp, lean into the community, have a conversation with somebody in this group or another group, maybe share something challenging that's happening, into the day with a clear mindset, and it's a far better day. So, just jumping back to a couple of those questions that I touched on much earlier on. Can we achieve purpose without community? I don't believe so. I think it's absolutely essential. Guido was talking about going in a slightly different direction as well now that your sort of life has opened up and there's different freedoms, etc. TP was talking about it somewhat, but I'm a big believer that we need to do it. We need to do it together as a community, whatever that community is. And is community critical to success? Now I look at the last 11 years, again prior to 2010, very different definition of what success is, very different definition of what community was, really not understanding what community is. And I look at where I am today, and I think I would have probably gone a very different path had I not leaned into some of these communities. So to summarize, I didn't want to talk for too long. You know, there's various communities that we are part of within Dubai, outside Dubai, with 2BYB, that are priceless in terms of leaning in, getting the support in return. And I think as men, we're not great at doing this. So it's something that I wanted to talk about today. Lastly, this is a phrase I use all the time, and I think we sometimes forget. I do. How fortunate we are. I'm a big believer in this. You know, look at where we are, look at who we're with, look at the environment we're in, look at the lives that we live, and we bitch and moan sometimes about you know, silly little things that that in the moment seem very, very difficult. But we are the lucky ones. I firmly believe that, and. Community is an incredibly important part of my life. So, thank you.